Welcome to the It's Better Together podcast, where intelligent conversations turn dreams into action, with hosts Marcy Stoudt and Alison Nissen. Each episode highlights inspirational women and practical business advice from the Revel Coach Tuesday at 2 live programs. From building a website to securing more clients, we cover topics that are interesting to you. In this highlight reel of Tuesday at 2, we speak with Becky Roth about career exploration, career change, and career management, and how she helps individuals achieve success, balance, and fulfillment in their lives. Let's meet Becky.
I can't wait. And before I do that, I'm just going to spray a little Lysol to make sure everybody, cleanse.
Clean.
Everyone's clean. So it makes me feel better when I know it's here. So first of all, I have my master's in occupational social work, and my background was working with employee assistant programs, which is more of behavioral health care. I always had an interest in the word career since I was 20 years old when I was at University of Pittsburgh, and I worked for University of Pittsburgh Medical Center through an internship, and I was a community aid worker. I went to grad school. I did my EAP career, which, I was different facets of it. I was an EAP counselor. I was also a network provider, and I was also a trainer. And my last gig was an account manager for over 10 years. So it was about a 15-year career. And one day I went to a networking event, and there was a career coach there for the EAP association meeting. And she told me all about, she was telling the group what she did. So I went right up to her and I said, I've always wanted to be a career coach. I want to be you. What do I need to do? So I was just ready. I was about 40 years old. So I then went to a program called College of Executive Coaching. I started looking into it, I think around July in 2011. And they had a program, like a week, fast-paced program in Silver Spring, Maryland. And I live outside the DC area. So I signed up and I figured that was my way to go. And I completed that program by August the following year. But I started my coaching practice in 2012. I just felt like in January, I was just going to do it. I've been talking about it with friends, how I was like career coaching, career counseling. And finally, after I met, and she became my coach, by the way, that woman, after I met her name is Marty, I said, that's it, I'm going to do it. So it was a big, moment of change in a good way, and very nervous to start it because, who was I going to be as a coach? You have to find your niche and figure all that out. So it took me a long time, and I've been doing the coaching practice for 8 years now and loving every minute of it. Love working with all my clients, seeing all their progress, seeing, some ups and downs with some people I work with, but always coming through in the end.
Becky, if you could share a little bit, so you have your niche, career and life coaching. Can you just share, how you host one of your meetings? So give us from like the beginning of, you've got a client that's interested in meeting with you. Can you walk us through the client engagement process and how you host your sessions?
Yeah, it's a great question, Marcy. So when I always do a free coaching consult, and most coaches and, most therapists also, or counselors or even business consultants do that. And in that call, real quick, I always make sure I send them information on a career coaching questionnaire, an agreement form, and, what my services are and the payments for that. So before I meet with someone, I already have some connection to them through that call. And that call is about 15 minutes. So anyone who's thinking of whether seeking the services or starting their own coaching practice, I highly recommend to always do a consult. It's just a great way to introduce yourself and also make sure it's the right fit for you and for that client. So when we get to meet, Mars, in the first session or first appointment, I already have an idea from the questionnaire that they fill out of some of the areas we're going to go over. Now, the questionnaire is about 15 questions approximately. So I usually go over about 3 of the questions because there's so much to go over in one session. And what I've learned is you just can't rush it. Even though the person sitting there is ready to just get a new job, talk about their resume, you have to first of all break it down into what it is that they're looking for in the next role, and what is important to them. And I use like a job search checklist to make sure we get, we start to self-design their job, not knowing where they're going next.
And do you find that our clients kind of coming to you in a place where they're stuck, they don't know where to begin, or do they have like kind of some clarity of where they want to go? They just need you to refine it. Like, how do you help? What's kind of like the common scenario?
So there's 3 areas I focus on, and the first 2 are more the areas I find where clients and myself are drawn to. So career exploration is a big area where they're just not sure what they want to do. They think they do. They're just in this transition stage, but they want to first explore some more ideas. So that's one idea. Then there's career transition, where someone is really ready to make, as I went through it, make a transition from one career to a next, as you all maybe on this call have gone through it in some ways. And then career management. So if that's more in the executive coaching, leadership management, where they still come to me individually, but they're looking to expand their practice, expand their, get, better performance evaluations within their roles, and move up in their companies one way or another, whether it's lateral or advancement. But I find myself, the first 2 I do more of, the career exploration, the career transition. And I work, just real quick, I work with clients from young adults. I didn't start at first with young adults, but with college. I'm not doing teenagers. College until, moms re-entering the workforce, or anyone going through a career and life transition, to also retirement, where someone's in their next chapter in their life. It doesn't always have to be retirement.
I want to remind everyone who's on the phone or on the Zoom call, feel free to use the chat box if you have any questions, because I do know there's some people that are on this call, so I'm looking at the list, that are actually in the coaching business. And, we can kind of talk about how you run your business. And then I also know some people that might be interested just in getting some free coaching advice. So feel free to use the chat box when you'd like. So Becky, another question. So do you have any favorite questions? So say you're going to appoint and a client is giving a lot of information, time's running short. Do you have like a question you'd like to use that kind of gets more clarity to what the real, either the real problem or the real opportunity that the client is articulating?
Well, this question can be used in any way. So sometimes I'll say to them, and maybe it might be about interviewing. We're talking about interviewing, and I'll say, what is the question you're fearing the most in an interview? Or what is a question you're fearing the most, in this exploration that we're talking about? What are your biggest fears in this process? Because that is really a big piece of a coaching practice, or someone needing career tips, where they're feeling, the hurdles are in the way. And we have to make sure we dissect those hurdles. What are those hurdles? And it's different than counseling, because we're really trying to get to some goals. We're trying to achieve it. And I move really fast because they're ready to get a job. They don't want to, exploration doesn't move as fast, but we still want to explore job ideas. So, but the question is, what are your fears? And sometimes I change that to, what are your challenges too? Because the word fear is fearful, right? It's not even fun to hear the question. But to really think about, and when I ask it, I find myself and the person I'm working with is relieved to just talk about it, because it's been such a hurdle in this process, one way or another. So, and feel free to ask questions, like Marcy said in the chat box, about, anything about career or coaching, that come up in your mind. Feel free to do that, and we'll answer that.
I understand with coaching that you're not supposed to necessarily put answers in their heads, that you just let them speak. So how challenging is it when you feel like you could give them the answer, but they have to be guided there? So how do you navigate that particular challenge?
That is a challenge for me, because I like to have a concrete answer, all the time. And over the 8 years of having this business, of this practice, I found myself wanting to just, give them a hug in their career in the first session. We did it, we have it all done, but learning in time that it is a process. And it can take a couple months. It can take up to a year, depending on the person and what their needs are. It's easier, Alison, when someone's not in a crisis, in their position. I do get a lot of people, especially right now with COVID, that there's some crises going on. So the speed of it changes a little bit, and have to break it down into what can we achieve today that will help decrease some of that career anxiety, life anxiety that we're having. But it is something in coaching. So this is interesting. I have a counseling degree, right? So you're always taught to let the client, work it out. In coaching, you can be a little more active in it. Not much, maybe 20%. So that was good for me because I need to be more active, but still not too active. So in the coaching program I went to, and I do believe there's someone on here who went to the same program, they taught us, and I mentioned this on our last call, the good model, where you have your goals, right? You start to break that down. And then the second one is your options. So in the options is talking about some ideas, so you don't have to try to solve it in one session. If that answers it. Does that answer it?
Not totally. Yes, that helps. It helps. So
Okay.
do you ever have to kindly steer a client away from a career because you can see it's not a good fit for their skill set?
So yes, if they're, a big piece of what coaching is about looking at not just your strengths, okay, and whatever kind of strengths assessment you're doing, but also looking at your values and making sure that the values are matching as well as the strengths. And when we're able to break down the values, that is a way, instead of saying this isn't the right career, is to help someone achieve realizing that their values have to match as well as their strengths. So if someone has had a career, they may be ready to leave it. That's kind of easy, right? To help them with that. If they're thinking of a new career, and their personality might not match it, their skill set, then we have to talk about what are some ideas beyond that idea. So it's not putting an end to it, but helping them feel there's a lot of options, and for steering someone away is the third part of that good model, Alison, is the obstacles too. What are the obstacles there that we have to look at before we take the action?
That makes sense. So you have them point out their own obstacles, and then maybe they will come to the conclusion that's better suited for them. So how do you prioritize tasks with all the things that are going on in the world and time being so critical now? Do you have a way, a system, a process that you deal with that?
Well, no, I'm kidding. I do. So each session, I'm very micro and then to macro. I'm not as macro to micro. So I really have to break it down. I have to go over, I call it fun homeworks, in what we're going to be discussing today in the session. And so that has to do in the beginning of the session. But I also then begin to say, is there anything I need to know that happened in the past week or two since we've met that we need to go over that's on your mind? So that, it might sound a little bit like counseling, but it's really about coaching, because maybe they lost their job, maybe they're furloughed, maybe they're still at their job, but they're really, really not, looking forward to it right now, but they feel there's less choices to move on. So then we address that in regards to some of the areas that we also want to talk to. So that's how I begin. And then at the end, I always make sure I go over the steps we're going to do for the next time we meet. And I adjust it. It's one thing about coaching, you have to adjust working with someone. And I feel that's where one of my strengths is I do understand that, I can have my agenda. And Marcy, I know we talked about this. I can have my agenda, but it's what's their agenda. I mean, that's coaching, what is important to them. And sometimes we do have to adjust our schedule that day with them.
Yeah. I love that when you had given that advice, because when you're in corporate America and you have people, working for you on your team, you're kind of all on the same path of deadlines. But with coaching, you really just have to come with an open heart, because what they say a few days ago is the priority can completely change when you show up. So you definitely enlightened me to that. And I find that to be the most valuable, if you could just create space for the client and ask questions. is something pretty
It is.
priceless as a coach.
I see Helen asked a question. Hi, Helen. And
So Helen said, what's your biggest challenge as an entrepreneur?
Becky, the entrepreneur. My biggest challenge is, and it's what I would answer in an interview question, what's your biggest weakness or challenge, is still social media marketing. And I am working on it, but I find just keeping up with the trends, always making sure you're, not just the website, but just how you're reaching out to others, to expand the business. That's just something I've always been challenged. And it's interesting because Marcy and Alison started Revel last year, correct? Like a year ago?
And a year and a half ago, yeah.
A year and a half ago. So, the Zoom calls, right, was and something that I had to get over personally. And what's so interesting with COVID, how many of us now just had to learn that in about 4 weeks? Everything about Zoom, everything about other platforms that maybe we're using, video platforms. And now, that's not as scary anymore. Like we're just all adjusting to it. And I'm actually teaching some people about some technical, some of it. But I do have to definitely improve. And that's something I'm always striving for.
Well, I always love being like, you're your best student.
Right.
You want to make sure you're doing the right things. So Sonia asked another great question. What is your coach approach when a client is trying to build their LinkedIn page?
Okay. Thank you, Sonia. Well, and due to the social media and the techie, I say Becky's trying to be a techie. I have learned to overcome that. One of my fears, and I'm going to, just explain, in the beginning of the coaching practice was rewriting resumes, right? And that's a big part of coaching, of career coaching, and LinkedIn profiles. And I had to really, really get over that. And all I do now, pretty much, especially with COVID, is I'm rewriting resumes and helping with LinkedIn profiles. And I'll just a side note, when I first started that first year, my husband was doing the resumes because I thought he was a better writer. But, we didn't last too long doing that particular approach. However, you learn each year, what to do. So in building a LinkedIn page, there's a lot to do with that. And I actually find LinkedIn fun. There's still always more to learn. It changes all the time, but that is the number one professional, so, an easier way, in my opinion, to show yourself to employers as well as, doing a resume. It's so important to have a LinkedIn page, even if you're not in the field, even if the field doesn't seem like you should have one. A lot of clients that want to start a business, I'll say, and they don't have the money to have a website, I'm like, try with LinkedIn, use that as your website for now. And while you're building, that approach. So I love to help anyone, if, with LinkedIn profiles and make it their brand stand out, but also their own, personality stand out too through it.
Yeah. Well, Becky, after we do our, in the middle of this conversation, we'll do our maybe I could moment, and so more informed. Maybe you can pull up my LinkedIn and you can give me some advice, some live advice, kind of walk through what you coach.
Cool. Love to.
So are you game?
I'm game. Let's do
sounds great.
Becky's going to be your techie for today.
I would love that. So we have another question. How do you incorporate your social media into your coaching? Do you reach certain audiences on certain platforms?
That's a great question, Kayla. Some days I don't know how I do it, but I somehow do it. So one of the areas I had to figure out, and it took me a good year, 2 years, maybe 3 years to figure out my audience. And I was given, real quick, in my coaching program, I had a coach, you always get a coach through it. And she said, don't worry about your niche so much, your niche, in the first year to 2 years. Because I thought you had to know, I work with lawyers, or I only work with scientists. So once she said that, I felt very relaxed about it. And it helped me realize I can open my doors to many people, with a career or life transition concern or exploration concern. So in the social media, and I'm still working on this, is to make sure I'm, my website and my LinkedIn say that, and to invite the different audiences of who I feel I can help the most. And one area I realized is having a background in employee assistance programs. Some of you might know it, some of you don't. It's called EAPs, and it's like work-life balance is the beginning of my career. I realized I really like to help all kinds of professionals. It's not just educators or not just scientists. I really like to help all. And one area I help is in networking. That's one of my strengths. Their LinkedIn, their resume, making sure they're that we're finding the strategy to their personality that works for them to help them, get through the loud noises in job searching, career searching, and also, in their own business, in their coaching business. I am more of a traditional networker, so the online I still need to improve on, but I really have realized that a lot of my audiences, a lot of therapists will refer to me because of my counseling background. So that's one area I have really figured out, where one of my biggest referral sources are.
Becky, I want to ask, now that we've experienced this major change in society, as we're all sort of in the midst of and on the way out of this quarantine, is network going to be different? Do you think networking will be different?
It is such a good question, and I'm struggling with it too. I do believe it, but I believe we're already going through this, a paradigm shift with networking. So, the traditional networking of meeting with someone, right, of chit-chatting, I was finding so many people I work with just that it's not what they wanted to do. It wasn't the way they wanted to reach out to others. And maybe, you, Marcy and Alison, we have different styles, right, of networking. I also believe this is an incredible time for all of us to be doing networking while we're at home or trying, if you have time in between taking care of your families, and set some goals for yourself. But, the Zoom part, the phone, I did read, Alison, more people are calling or learning how to talk on the phone again. We got away from that. I know, isn't that interesting? Like our generation knows the phone, right? We used to have the phone all the time. But the younger generation, the millennial generation and the Gen Z are starting in the workforce. They're realizing, to use the phone a little bit or however they communicate, whether it's texting or not. It's just a lot of change that's going to happen. And I do think we're going to be outside again on the other side. It's just going to be on and off for a little while until maybe that vaccine happens. But, are you finding creative ways, like right now, like there's so many Zoom calls going on, and I use Zoom video platform. So many people are having, wine parties, right? Easter, they're having virtual connections or Passover or different ways of communicating. Have you all had some virtual meetings with family or?
Yeah, we just had a family reunion not too long ago. A couple nights ago, we had all of our cousins and we were coast to coast. It was really fun. And then you have one of those great times and we're all having cocktails and making fun of each other. And then you ended like, why don't we do that more often?
I know it's so in some ways it's teaching us new ways of appreciating, wow, I maybe should have been reaching out more.
Mm-hmm.
I highly, highly recommend though, this is such a good time wherever you are in your business, in your work, is to do some networking each week and set some goals for that. And I don't mean you have to call. If you don't ever want to talk to anybody, it's okay. You can email, you can text, any way you want to communicate with that person, you can do that. It's just important to keep doing it.
Mm-hmm. So we have another question. What inspires you the most about being a coach? Like what's most rewarding for you?
For me, the biggest reward, now remember, I am a social worker by my training, is when I get the email that someone, did get the job, that I did see that concrete goal, that they achieved everything we worked on. That is one of the most rewarding. Now, sometimes that goal isn't always, quote, getting a job or interviewing, but it could be they've achieved the goal that we worked on, getting back into school, or, got their certificate, or started volunteering, started their coaching business, went back to the coaching program. So anything where they've achieved the goals that we set from the start, it's just worth the emails. And, even though they might say, oh, I don't need to come see you anymore. I still say these are the best emails, and it really is rewarding, and it's somewhat selfish of me, but I do get so much out of it as much as they do. So
Imagine.
in that regard.
Well, Becky, I know you work with people that pivot from, whatever career they're in to their new career. And you mentioned setting goals and volunteering. What are the type of goals? I mean, what would an average person, like if I wanted to have a whole new career, what's a top item you might tell me to start with?
So the first thing I would want to do is as part of that checklist I talk about, is I would want to talk with you and ask you, you don't have to know what your job is going to be, where you're going. You don't have to know like your title, and you don't have to know what company you're going to, because that is a big hindrance on all of us. But tell me, what is it that you're looking forward to, tangible and intangible? And we just start brainstorming. So it could be, I just want to, I've heard this from clients. I want to sit at a desk all day and not talk to another person ever again. I swear I hear that. And then I hear, I don't want to sit at a desk all day and I want to talk to everybody. Like I hear both items, it's so interesting to me. You can never be bored. I hear, we talk about salary up front. And because it's asked immediately, other than I believe New York State, people still ask, about the salaries. I mean, eventually that'll change. We talk about location, that's flexibility, adaptability. These are themes I hear over and over again. And I pretty much say, let's design what a job description looks for you. And they look at me like I'm crazy because they never thought they could. We always try to fit in the job. I think coaches know not to fit into the job, but people in general, we just try to fit into that role that we see on the job description. Yes, you kind of have to sometimes, but the job description is never what it says. Also, we can always adjust it, unless it's maybe an entry-level job. But Alison, it really breaking down and trying to let them, it does sound like we're dreaming, but I do bring it back to reality. And say, now the next step, and then I break it down into maybe doing career assessments or personality assessments. I try to find a strategy for their personality with that. So,
does your coaching ever bleed over into your regular life, your relationships?
My personal life? Okay, that's a great question. Now, I'm a counselor, so this is something you have to learn when you go get your master's. And I know there's somebody on here who went to grad school with me. So yes, it does. And so what I've learned a long time ago, and I went to grad school in early 90s or mid 90s, don't date me, is I learned that there's some areas of the population I work better with than not. And I do have 2 children. I have 2 boys, they're in middle school. But I realize I'm not the best babysitter. I'm not, that's not my specialization. I do care about children, but it wasn't for me. And I knew that back in college. And so it's important for me, I realized where can I be of service to others, but also where it doesn't affect my personal life. And I'm able to kind of let it go. Now, once in a while it does. I mean, we're all human. People are, unfortunately, you hear about 17 million unemployed, that number, right? It's like, I think about that and it makes me, I can't say that wouldn't hurt me, but that would hurt anybody. So it's finding that balance. I'm a big, as you know, I love self-care and something, we always have to work on. And I'm pretty optimistic as a person, but yes, I'm still human. I have, I cry, I get angry. I have my ups and downs, but overall I, allow myself to stew for a little bit and then I feel good to help somebody again. Thank you for asking.
To watch a live Tuesday at 2 program with Revel Coach, visit us at revelcoach.com. Until next time.